Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome back to the lab. Tonight, we have a very special edition, a Friday edition of our show. And with games coming up tomorrow, better late than never to say that it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for tuning in to come and find out the great things that have been going on in this league. We're going to be recapping the thrilling action that we had last week, previewing the games to come up tomorrow, and see where things go from there. For those of you who are new to the Indoor Football League or to this channel, let me be the first to warmly welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of indoor football as a whole, a passion that I've parlayed into my current role as lead IFL contributor for Sports Coast to Coast. They are a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its member teams specifically. We've got up-to-date team rosters, game previews, recaps, a whole host of another analysis. If you want to bump up your fandom of the game, definitely recommend checking it out. I've put a URL in the description. We're there. You will also find the written version of my Wager Wednesday post. So with that having all been said, let's get into the presentation segment of this thing. So we are at week 5 out of 19. It's hard to believe that we're already a month into the IFL season. Seems like we just began things yesterday, but such is the nature of the fast-paced game that is indoor football. So, week 4, insanely entertaining series of games. We had just about anything that an IFL fan would want in terms of outcomes. We had an overtime game. We had a game decided by a last-second field goal. A team improving its streak of perfection over to 4 games. Whatever you are looking for as far as an entertainment factor in the Indoor Football League, chances are at least one of these games delivered that in spades to you. We had our first couple games reach the century mark on the season, and we will begin things tonight by recapping each and every one of those and seeing how those contribute to our season-long tracker. We'll figure out where things stand from a team and bet standpoint. And once we have all of that, we'll recap our lessons learned and try to translate that into some week 5 betting success. We've got 4 games to make our selections, and we'll construct a 3-leg parlay as well. So stick around for that. Week 4. Like I said before, it was thrilling action. We began things with a Friday doubleheader, beginning with the Tulsa Oilers and the Green Bay Blizzard in the third and final home game of that stand for the Blizzard. And this game was incredible. Vintage indoor football from an offensive standpoint. The teams just traded punches one after the other. TJ Edwards for the Oilers got right back to his usually explosive ways. Max Myler on the other side for the Blizzard, continuing his crazy offensive efficiency. And we were basically at 78 points with only 30 minutes in the books. Like, we could have only had a Rouge as the only source of point scoring in that second half to get our bet of over 78.5 to cash. Needless to say, this game absolutely blew that out of the water. And just to spice things up a little bit, we got overtime. Green Bay had rallied from as many as 9 points down. They make the first defensive stand in overtime, and then with their possession in the extra frame, Kamani Clark adds to his league-leading rushing touchdown total to clinch the win for the Green Bay Blizzard. Final score was 74-68. That ties last year's game between the Wranglers and Gunslingers as the highest scoring game the IFL has seen in the last 5 years. And coincidentally, that game also ended with the final score of 74-68. So that is how we got our week kicked off. The second end of that doubleheader saw San Diego at 0-2 travel to Vegas to play the Nighthawks, the season opener in Lee's Family Forum. And this was a very sloppy game. Both teams had stretches where it just looked like they were lost, confused, didn't necessarily know what they were doing. Ultimately, though, more errors were made by the Vegas Nighthawks. In particular, just discipline-wise, they were off this game. They ended up having 17 penalties accepted against them. And head coach Mike Davis will probably be the first to tell you that's 17 too many. Twice did the Nighthawks have a double-digit lead in this game. They led by as many as 14 to get things underway. Carried a 13-point lead into the fourth quarter. And that's when San Diego, with their backs against the wall, made their charge. They ended the game on a 21-0 run. They got 2 key takeaways at the very end of the game, standing as their first 2 takeaways of the season, actually. So the Strike Force pulling out an underdog victory at Vegas, that game ending 35-27, as both teams now sit 1-2 on the young season. We had another team at 0-2, kicking off Saturday's action. The Massachusetts Pirates wrapping up their season opening 3-game homestand against the red hot Fishers Freight. And this was another absolutely thrilling outing. The Pirates offense got firmly back on the saddle. They righted the ship. New offensive coordinator Martino Theus coming in and having quite a debut from an offensive orchestration standpoint. Kenji Behar, 7 total touchdowns, 3 through the air, 4 on the ground. Easily his best game as an IFL signal caller so far. But not to be outdone. The Freight rallied back in the fourth quarter. They even tied the game up late. But in the end, it was that last possession from the Pirates at the very end of the game turned out to be the difference. Josh Gable, recently re-signed by the Pirates, replacing Timmy Leakrode, nailed a 20-yarder to win the game as time expired, with the Pirates getting a much-needed win to keep their season afloat. 50-47, their victory over the Fishers Freight, first ever loss for the first-timers in the circuit. So another thriller there. And what a game we had in Quad City with the Iowa Barnstormers visiting the Steamwheelers. This was the back end of a home-and-home series, and Quad City picked up right where they left off in Des Moines. They put up another 50-burger as Daquan Neal looks firmly in command of that offense. Definitely an early consideration for MVP discussion. And for Iowa, we had much of the same. The coaching staff looking to get both quarterbacks involved through the air. Running game be darned, and largely got the same result. We ended up having the over for this game. And with the score 53-29, I believe it was, inside the last minute of the game, needed an Iowa touchdown in order for the bet to stand. And we got it with 20 seconds remaining on the clock. A true sweat. And for those of you who watched the show last week, you'll know that I pitched that as a very real possibility that Iowa could have scored that late touchdown to swing money one way or the other. And true to form, they did exactly that. That game-ending touchdown didn't really do a whole lot for the practical outcome of the game, as the Steamwheelers keep their perfect streak alive, 4-0, with a win by score of 53-35 as the Steamwheelers enter their bye week. Third game, we had Jacksonville at Tucson. A very interesting game between one of the hottest teams in the league versus a team that's still looking for its identity. But this one turned out to be super, super close. In particular, both offenses were kind of stuck in the mud for a while. The game was only 7-7 at halftime, if you can believe it. And the Sugar Skulls actually led in this game in the fourth quarter. They briefly held a 21-20 lead. Jacksonville did get a touchdown and 2 points to go back up by 7. But the Sugar Skulls, unfortunately for them, they went empty in their last 2 possessions, as that Shark defense is looking very much like the real deal. Definitely not the prettiest game that we've seen from the Sharks, but no matter. They get the win, advance to 3-0 with a 28-21 victory. We nailed the under at 79.5 in a game where we didn't even crack 50. So that one was relatively stress-free. The only thing that could have potentially gotten in our way was overtime. But luckily, we ended the game in 60 minutes and got out a winner there. We also had the Gunslingers go up against the Arizona Rattlers out in Glendale. And this game was a whole lot of fun. Definitely some massive back and forth swings. The Gunslingers started out 14-0. Arizona responded with a huge run of their own, 39-8. We had kickoff return touchdowns, pivotal interceptions, as this game looked more and more like last year's typical Gunslingers game, where both teams were just absolutely blitzing it up the field without any sort of resistance. Unfortunately for us, this bet was ultimately decided by a coach's decision. Arizona was up by 12 late in the game, right around the 1-minute warning. They had a 4th and goal from San Antonio's 2-yard line. And in one of the more conservative play calls that we'll see out of Kevin Guy, he decides to run out Dawson Evans for a field goal attempt. He boots it through, puts Arizona up by 15. The problem, though, is that we got Arizona at minus 8.5. Translation: if the Gunslingers were to score a touchdown with any time remaining on the clock and get the extra point, we would suffer defeat. And wouldn't you know it, the Gunslingers come out, they strike up the field, and they get a touchdown with 5 seconds to go, plus the point after. Just a brutal, brutal way for a bet to lose. And it's already our second slip of the year where we bet on a favorite to cover and the other team backdoored us by the hook. Just positively disgusting way to go down. In the end, Arizona advances 3-0 with the win. They got it done 63-55. At that point, Arizona probably wouldn't care how much they won by, as long as they added the win to that side of the win-loss record. So bad beat there for us, which meant that our slips were 3-3 heading into Sunday's game between Northern Arizona and Bay Area. Like the Blizzard, this was Bay Area's 3rd and final game of their season opening homestand. And this game was peak Panthers. We got great defense, fairly solid offense from Joshua Jones, though still not perfect, as Northern Arizona put up a little bit of a fight, but then ran out of gas in the second half. Pretty similar to their season opening game against Fishers a couple weeks ago. But from an over-under standpoint, this got hairy. We had kickoff returns for touchdowns, couple pick sixes from the Panthers, just really quick sources of scoring that we needed every empty possession that we could get down the stretch. And sure enough, we had just enough buffer room to where a couple late touchdowns at the end were not enough to swing this against us. In the end, Bay Area gets their second straight win with a 50-28 win over the Wranglers, who now sit at 0-2, along with the Tucson Sugar Skulls at the bottom of the barrel in that Western Conference. So that is how week 4 went down for us. We were 4-3. But as you can see on that bottom table, that money line betting is painful. But on the other side of the ledger, our picks on game totals have been about as spot on as you could ask for. So a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. Again, the goal here is to address that bad and keep the good times rolling. So that is what we will be trying to do here moving forward. This was the first week where our parlay really died at the beginning. We had picked Fishers in Massachusetts to stay under 78.5, and we pretty much got the opposite sort of game flow. This was a shootout right from the beginning. We had 9 touchdowns in the first 9 possessions of the game. So right around halftime, I could tell, yeah, this parlay is probably not going to make it out to the second leg, which even had it done so, the Sharks winning by 7 was not enough to cover the 8.5 spread that they were set at against Tucson. We did avoid a completely red slip with picking Northern Arizona and Bay Area under 81.5. We kind of double dipped there. Again, that bet is paying huge dividends for those going to it on a consistent basis since last season. So 2 parlay wins, 2 parlay losses, and the parlay wins have come on odd-numbered weeks. And guess what? We're at an odd-numbered week. I'm just saying. So here's a look at our year-to-date net gain and loss. So we are a game above 500 at the moment, but we can really see where that 10% juice on each bet type really begins to kick in. So we are pretty much at about even on the flat method and a slight loss on the weighted method. Or as my sister likes to call it, this is a 4-week exercise in futility. I beg to differ, but that is a story for a different time. So that is where we stand currently. From a dollars perspective, our ROI perspective, unsurprisingly, looks very much the same. So we are essentially back to ground zero to try to come up with a pretty solid streak here in the next 4 or 5 weeks or so to get that ROI back up to the positives where we want it to be. Our yearly results by bet, this is where things get very interesting because as you can see, things are more or less kind of going back to normal, at least as far as the spread, in terms of favorites and underdogs, in terms of road versus home. There's only 1 game separating those from being even, as we've played an odd number of games right now. The money line bets are kind of getting closer to league average as well, with favorites winning 13 out of 21 so far. Favorites were 5-2 straight up last week. Annoyingly, the 2 games where I did pick the favorites, the underdogs won. And if you do a little bit of number crunching based on win-loss frequencies, based on being the favorite or the underdog, the chances of picking both games incorrectly where you pick the favorites, it came out to like 1.5 or 2%. And if you look at our money line betting so far, the chances of getting all 5 wrong so far, based on what we've done, is pretty much the same. Translation, we have gotten the most rotten luck imaginable with money line betting. So the other side of the coin to that is that eventually things should regress back to the mean. So do we go with more money line bets over the next week or so? We'll see how it goes. But it is something to monitor as we kind of move forward here. Some notable team-by-team trends. We've got Quad City right there. They are 4-0 straight up, but also 4-0 against the spread. So anybody that has backed the Steam Wheelers in any capacity has been doing really, really well for themselves so far. Likewise, from an over-under standpoint, Iowa's 3-0 to the over. Arizona's 3-0 to the over. And we've got a couple more teams that are also undefeated to the under at this point, namely the Jacksonville Sharks and our personal favorite at this point, the Bay Area Panthers. So as we get deeper into the season here, we'll start to see some of these teams either rise or fall. And they're going to be very powerful data points for us when we make our picks later on in the season. But at this point right now, we're getting the very beginning of that data that we'll be able to leverage. Here's a quick look at the team-by-team trends. We had mentioned Arizona perfect to the over, Bay Area perfect to the under. But there's also some other pretty nice trends here that we'll want to keep an eye on and see if there's any value with those picks going forward. And our bet team by results, or bet results by team rather, as you can see, we now have at least one winning slip involving all 14 teams in the IFL. I think personally, this is a huge deal. Because of this, we're not in a situation like last year where we were like, oh my gosh, we are 0-7 in Tucson Sugar Skulls games to start. Like, we got to fix this. By running this exercise now, we're hopping right in front of it right away and trying to strike as much balance with each team as we can. So we've got 3 wins already with Green Bay, 3 wins already with Quad City. Again, our goal for every team is at least 7 wins. So the early returns here are very, very encouraging. Now it is time for my disclaimer section. All lines and odds will come from DraftKings Sportsbook. In the event that certain wagers are not offered on that platform, we will rely on FanDuel to fill in those blanks. Our bet evaluations, as always, are going to be based on what DraftKings has to offer. These are my own personal picks based on that season-long model that I've referred to throughout the series' existence. This is for entertainment, and this is for fun. This is not a money-making thing. This is not I guarantee this is going to happen. There's no such thing as a lock in the sports wagering world, and it should be respected as such. You're more than welcome to follow along with my bets and tail if you so choose. But if you do so, please gamble responsibly. Practice safe gaming habits. Manage your time and your budget wisely. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if your loved one is having any problems with problem gambling, there's a lot of resources online that you can refer to for assistance with that. Haveagameplan.org is one of many resources that offers some really great assistance with problem gaming issues. So with that, we've got 4 games on the docket. It is time to put up the big board here and make some picks. Whoops. Go back to this. And I want to shout out Monica. Thank you for hopping on the show tonight and chiming in. Yeah, I know Kayla. Let me just say this. It'll be very tough to convince her to join a show involving betting. She's not as mathematically inclined as I put myself out to be. But it would be a very, very fun concept. And I could very well see a scenario where she makes picks and outdoes me. That's the beauty of this game, is that there's really no right or wrong answers to the methodologies that you use, because everybody's different. I rely on math and modeling. Other people might rely on, hey, I like this mascot better than that mascot. It really just depends. Anyways, I digress. Let's kick things off with the 7:05 Eastern Time game there on the clock. We have the Massachusetts Pirates going to Jacksonville, not to take on the Sharks, but to take on the North Florida Ospreys. This is a nice little promotion that Jacksonville is doing, representing their local mid-major college by donning football uniforms for a program that doesn't actually sponsor football. So it'll be a fun one. Jacksonville is favored by 6.5. The over-under is 78.5. Mass is plus 180 money line, and Jacksonville minus 218. I should mention, for those who have read my post already, is that some of these lines have significantly changed from what they opened at late yesterday. This Pirate Sharks game is one of those. So this was originally set at Pirates plus 9.5, with money line at plus 250 and minus 310. But that has since been changed. It could be the result of maybe some players that are not expected to suit up from the Sharks side of the ledger. We did see Jimmy Robinson last week in Tucson have a touchdown run where apparently suffered a non-contact injury of some sorts on the celebration afterwards. So who knows if he may be able to suit up or if he winds up going to IR. Prayers for a speedy recovery nonetheless for Jimmy, one of the more explosive players this league has seen in the past few years. But this is going to be a good one. This is a rematch of a week 1 game that saw the Sharks dominate the Pirates at Tsonga Center 46-25. And that is exactly the result that Jacksonville is going to look for to repeat in order to tie Quad City atop the Eastern Conference at 4-0. So with this bet, I look at Jacksonville's efficiency for offense and defense to this point in the season. They're among the league's best in terms of offense minus defense in the early going. And given where we stand with money line betting right now, the smarter play is probably Sharks minus 6.5. But out of a sense of necessity, I'm locking in the Jacksonville Sharks at minus 218. This is not a bad price at all for a team that's averaging 2 touchdowns better per 10 possessions than their opposition. For comparison, the Pirates are about minus 5.5 points per 10 possessions. And Monica's right with me. Jacksonville money line. It's definitely one of the safer perceived bets on the board for this week. You're getting a top 2 team in the IFL at home against a team that they've already went out and beat by 21. And we've said it since week 14 or 15 of last season, since the Sharks brought on Caleb Barker. Like, this has been arguably the most successful team in terms of betting spreads and money lines in the entire IFL. So I don't think anybody can fault you at all for going with the Sharks money line. Spread also is a great play at minus 6.5. You're below that key number of 7. And we've seen already in a handful of games this year, that extra point either way definitely can matter. And more often than not, it does. So Massachusetts did great to get themselves back up to 1-2. But I do think it's going to take a Herculean effort to bring their record to 2-2 against this team. So that's my play for this one. Sharks minus 218 to try to set the tone for the season, or for this week, rather. The other 7:05 p.m. game, this is the Dixie Wooten game. His host, Fisher's Freight, visits his former team in the Bay Area Panthers. This is a big non-conference clash, one where Bay Area comes into Indiana as 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is 79 and the hook. Bay Area is minus 142 money line, and Fisher's is plus 120. If you know me well, you probably know where I'm going with this pick. but I'm actually going to vary it up a little bit. So these are two teams that, in their sample of 3 games thus far this season, have played pretty exceptional ball. So you can't really fault bookmakers for putting this at a reasonably even game. In the end, I took a look at each team's kind of roster and their current structure, what they've done to this point in the season. The deciding factor for me was the overt strength of the Bay Area Panther defense. They've yet to give up 30 points in a game this season. And even though it would be a challenge to hold Fishers underneath that, it's not at all implausible that another sub 30 could be in store for that Panther defense, especially with the apparent unknown factor at quarterback. Does Jaya Wright start, or does Keegan Shoemaker? Shoemaker got the fourth quarter all to himself in the Massachusetts game last week, so it'll be very interesting to see which direction to go with. Monica's liking Bay Area at plus 2.5. I actually have the opposite end here. I have the opposite end with Bay Area minus 2.5. I just think overall throughout the season, they've been slightly more efficient across the board in their handful of games. But I will concede, if this was plus 3.5 or minus 3.5, I would be right there with you and take the freight. I just think the key number of 3 here is among one of the deciding factors of this wager. It could very well be a situation where this game comes down to a kick. And for Fishers, they've got a new kicker in Leventritt, a league veteran that has spent some time with teams like Tucson, among others. I just like Bay Area in this spot on the road. It should be a good game nonetheless. We saw Fishers already play at home in a game and absolutely dominate. That was that 40-29 win over Tulsa in week 2, I believe. Week 2 or week 3, somewhere around there. But let's stick with this pick. Bay Area minus 2.5. Tell you what, Monica, if Fishers winds up winning the game or otherwise covers, you will have the last laugh. All right, we're halfway home, and we are at another week 1 rematch. This is the San Antonio Gunslingers heading to Tulsa to take on the Oilers. Spread is Tulsa minus 2.5. Over-under is 81 in the hook. Gunslingers are plus 120 money line, and Tulsa minus 142. It took me a while to figure out what I really wanted to do with this game, because each of these bets I do see a reasonable chance of happening. What ultimately sways my selection here is that if you look at last week, the Guns and the Oilers were both involved in 100-plus point outings. Obviously, the Oilers game had a combined 142. San Antonio versus Arizona last week was not too far behind with 100, I believe, 23. So all of a sudden, this has a feel where we've got two teams that could be very conducive to the over for at least this game and possibly moving forward. Both offenses hit another gear, and defensively, both teams are kind of struggling a little bit. In the case of the Gunslingers, it's trying to navigate all of the losses that they've seen their unit have in terms of coach and player departures. It just feels like a scenario where they're going to be trying to retool on the fly, which against TJ Edwards might not necessarily turn out well. So my pick for this game, I'm going back to the over. This is 81.5. Certainly plausible that both teams get to 40 plus, and this bet hits without much of a sweat. Of course, we did have an anomaly game the last time these two teams faced each other, where the final score was 28-20. But we live in a much different world than we did a month ago, where both teams are kind of trying to forge different paths here. San Antonio trying to stay afloat, and Tulsa trying to stay alive as well. I like this. I like the chances of this game hitting the over. An 81.5 is right below that 83.5 line. That has been the average thus far this season. So it is the highest total of the week, but again, not particularly that high compared to what we've seen before. And our final game, Tucson at Northern Arizona, to go down at 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And this is a game where both teams are looking for their first win. Northern Arizona is hosting, and they're given 4 in the hook. The over-under is 78.5. Tucson's plus 150 and Northern Arizona minus 180. This is the other game on the board that saw significant changes from what we had open on late Thursday night, as everything changed here. And initially, Tucson was plus 3.5. The over-under was 80.5. And the money line offerings were slightly different. So initially, I took Tucson plus 3.5. I saw this when I got back from my golf outing after work today. And I was like, all right, Tucson's plus 150 now on the money line. They were minus 120 or plus 124 before, and I didn't bite. Is this enough to get me to bite on the Tucson Sugar Skulls? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. I just think both teams are kind of in the same boat right now, trying to figure out who they are. And these are the 12th and 13th ranked teams in the coaches poll. So it's really anybody's guess as to what happens here. You also have Northern Arizona, granted small sample size, but they're the league's only winless team against the spread thus far. And for Tucson, they made seismic roster moves this week, bringing in Jorge Reyna, the journeyman quarterback, along with trading with Arizona for Trip Harrington, who carries experience as both a quarterback and a wide receiver. So whoever gets a start there should figure to be an upgrade against an attackable Northern Arizona secondary. And Monica's going Northern Arizona money line. I do like it, but minus 180, I don't like laying that much juice in this case. Where a game, I could very well see this game ending with the margin of victory being 6 points or less. I really could. And to be honest, it's time for me to try to put myself out there more with these outright money line selections. I know they haven't been great in the past year plus, but I think this is a good opportunity to kind of buy low on Tucson, see whether Reyna or Harrington starts. I suspect it'll be Harrington, and we saw what he can do with both Frisco and Arizona over the past couple of seasons. Could potentially be a game changer for the Skulls. So that is my play for that fourth and final game. And now we are going to construct our 3-leg parlay. We've got 4 games to choose from, so we're unfortunately going to have to leave one out here. But my first play to get things kicked off here, it's a little bit of a hedge, but I'm going to take the Pirates at plus 6.5, which may be a surprise to some of you who have followed me for the past few years. And you may know me as the guy that constantly talks about how fruitless the Pirates have been against the spread on the road. In fact, before the middle of last year, they were 0-13 against the spread on the road to begin the DraftKings era. So why the heck am I making it my pick here? The answer at its core is reasonably simple. Our single game bet to begin the week is Jacksonville minus 218. In taking the Pirates plus 6.5 here, we're essentially guaranteeing ourselves that at least one and maybe both of those picks turn up to be correct. And if we get a scenario where the Sharks win by 6 points or fewer, not only will we have the single game win, but we'll also have our first leg of the parlay in the bag. And we've seen a bunch of teams backdoor cover already. So if the Pirates are trailing by, 10, 13 points, something like that late in the game, and they get a drive, they could get there. So that'll be an interesting one to look out for. We'll lead things off with Pirates plus 6.5. Try to ride that underdog spread trend. My second pick of the parlay will take the Bay Area Fishers game. And I'm going to go with the under once more. This honestly seems like cheating at this point in taking Bay Area under every week in some way, shape, or form. But tell me how I'm supposed to not include it when it is 15-5 in the last 20 games. A lot of that has to do with Bay Area's defense being arguably the league's best. But a fair amount of this decision is also banking on a bounce back effort from Fisher's defense after letting up 50 to Massachusetts in last week's loss. This game could very well be a rock fight. You got two quarterbacks who both love to run the football and two defenses that have shown to varying degrees that they can be game changers. Obviously, we'll have the usual shenanigans to worry about in terms of betting in under this low with explosive plays, short fields, things like that. But as long as the defenses hold their end of the bargain well enough, I fail to see how this can't be 16 of the last 21 in terms of Panthers unders. To cap off the parlay, I'm looking at San Antonio and Tulsa. And I've got the Oilers on the spread here. Again, this is a scenario where we get a favorite below that key number of 3. And in the prior meeting between these two teams, the Oilers won by 8 and covered as 1.5 point favorites. And now that they are at home, minus 2.5 seems like an absolute bargain. And San Antonio, man, it pains me to see how things have kind of devolved for them since that win against Bay Area, which should have been a galvanizing win. But you just never know with these sort of things, I guess. I do worry a little bit about Tulsa's defense potentially being a leaky point with this pick, but I don't think it's enough to sway me from minus 2.5. So those are my 3 picks put together in tandem. It is the second consecutive week where all of our legs carry odds of minus 110. So we are definitely taking a shot in the dark here. A $10 wager, if successful, returns us $69.57. And remember, our parlays have won on odd-numbered weeks to begin the season. So we will see if this parlay is the correct one to keep that trend alive. So again, it's right up here as well. Pirates cover at plus 6.5 to get us going. Bay Area and Fishers stays under 79.5. And the Tulsa Oilers cover at home in their home opener at minus 2.5 against the San Antonio Gunslingers. All righty. So that is all that I have for you this evening. Again, a very limited week in terms of the offerings, but we'll make do with what we have. Again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, learning about all the great goings on in this amazing league. For those of you who are going to try your luck and make some bets, I wish you the very best. We will see you at the cashier. Have a great night.